I never expected to find love during my morning run. My name is Alex. I'm 28, and for the past 3 years, I've been dedicated to my 6 a.m. routine at Riverside Park. Running has always been my sanctuary, a time when the world is still quiet, the air is crisp, and I can clear my head before diving into my job as a graphic designer. The park has become my second home, with its winding paths, tall oak trees, and the gentle sound of the river flowing alongside the trail. I know every bend, every incline, and every bench along my 5-mile route. There's something magical about the park at dawn, the way the first rays of sunlight filter through the leaves, creating patterns on the ground, and how the morning dew makes everything glisten. It's like having a private paradise before the world wakes up. That Tuesday morning seemed like any other. I laced up my blue running shoes, stretched my legs at my usual starting point near the park entrance, and set off on my familiar path. The playlist in my earbuds was the same mix of upbeat songs that had carried me through countless runs before. The rhythm of my feet hitting the ground matched the beat of the music, a symphony of movement that I had perfected over time. I was about a mile in when I noticed him. He appeared seemingly out of nowhere, joining the path from a side trail. Tall, with broad shoulders and dark curly hair that bounced slightly as he ran. He wore a simple gray running shirt and black shorts, nothing flashy, but somehow he immediately caught my attention. There was an effortless grace to his movement, a quiet confidence in his stride that made him stand out in the otherwise empty park. His profile was striking, a strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes that seemed focused on some distant point ahead. I couldn't help but glance his way more than once, trying not to be obvious about my sudden interest. For a few minutes, we ran parallel to each other, neither speeding up nor slowing down. Just two strangers sharing the same space in the early morning light. Then, as we approached a fork in the path, he glanced over at me and smiled. A warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes and made something flutter in my chest. "Morning," he said, his voice deep and slightly breathless from the run. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I nodded and returned his greeting, surprised by how easily conversation flowed between us despite my usual reservation with strangers. "I'm Jamie," he introduced himself as we continued running side by side. "Alex," I replied, wondering if I should say more or let the conversation fade naturally. But there was something about Jamie that made me want to keep talking. "I haven't seen you here before," I ventured. "Are you new to the area?" He chuckled, a pleasant sound that somehow harmonized with the morning birdsong around us. "Just changed my running route," he explained. "Been running on the other side of the park for years, but decided I needed a change of scenery." His eyes met mine briefly. "Seems like I made the right choice." There was something magical about running alongside someone who matched my pace so perfectly. Not too fast to leave me behind, not too slow to hold me back, just right, as if we had been running partners for years. Our footsteps fell into a synchronized rhythm, a cadence that felt both comforting and exhilarating. The usual solitude of my morning run transformed into something new, a shared experience that somehow enhanced rather than disrupted my routine. As we ran, we exchanged bits and pieces of our lives. I learned that Jamie was a physical therapist who specialized in sports injuries, that he lived in an apartment just 3 blocks from the park entrance, and that he had moved to the city 2 years ago after finishing his degree. In turn, I told him about my work as a graphic designer, my tiny studio apartment filled with plants, and my lifelong love of running. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences when we needed to catch our breath or navigate a particularly steep section of the trail. "So what made you start running at the crack of dawn?" Jamie asked as we crested a hill that overlooked the river. The sun was higher now, casting a golden glow over the water. I took a moment to appreciate the view before answering. Honestly, it started as a way to deal with anxiety after college. There's something about running early, before the world gets noisy, that helps clear my head. I surprised myself with my honesty. I usually gave people the simplified version, something about health or fitness goals. But with Jamie, the truth seemed to come out naturally. He nodded thoughtfully. "I get that. For me, it was after my dad got sick. Running became the one thing I could control when everything else felt chaotic. There was vulnerability in his admission that made me feel less alone in my own struggles. We shared a look of understanding that transcended the brevity of our acquaintance. Let me explain why this matters. In a world where connections often remain surface level, finding someone who immediately understands your deeper motivations is rare. It creates an instant bond that usually takes months to develop. We continued our run, pointing out favorite spots to each other. I showed him the ancient oak tree that I considered my halfway marker, and he showed me a hidden bench with a perfect view of the sunrise that I had somehow missed in all my years of running the same route. We laughed when a squirrel darted across our path, causing us both to jump slightly, and again when we realized we had the same brand of running shoes, just in different colors. These small moments of shared experience created a sense of camaraderie that felt both new and familiar at the same time. The pace of our run gradually increased as we reached the more challenging section of the trail. It wasn't a conscious decision, more like a natural evolution of our shared rhythm. My breathing became more labored, and I could hear Jamie's footsteps quickening beside me. There was an unspoken competition building between us, friendly but real. I pushed myself a little harder, and he matched me stride for stride. The trail narrowed as it curved around a dense cluster of trees, forcing us to run single file for a short distance. Jamie took the lead, and I followed, watching the muscles in his back flex with each powerful stride. When the path widened again, he slowed slightly to let me catch up. We were both breathing hard now, but there was exhilaration in the effort. "You're fast," he said with a grin that made my heart race even more than the run. "I was about to say the same about you," I replied, returning his smile. The connection between us seemed to strengthen with each mile, building into something I couldn't quite name but didn't want to end. We were approaching my favorite part of the trail, a stretch that ran alongside the river, where the morning light danced on the water's surface. The path here was smooth but narrow, with a steep drop to the water on one side. I had run it hundreds of times before and knew every route and rock by heart. We were running faster than I usually did, caught up in the joy of movement and company. I was slightly ahead of Jamie, leading the way around a sharp bend in the trail. That's when it happened. In one swift movement, Jamie closed the distance between us, matched my pace exactly, and then his hand shot out, fingers wrapping firmly but gently around my wrist. The sudden contact sent a jolt through my body, surprise, confusion, and something else I couldn't immediately identify. He pulled me to a stop so abruptly that I nearly lost my balance, my momentum carrying me forward while his grip held me back. "What?" I began, but the words died in my throat as I looked down and saw what Jamie had already noticed. Just inches from where my next footstep would have landed was a large branch that had fallen across the path, partially hidden by morning shadows. At the speed we were running, I might have tripped and fallen toward the river's edge. My heart, already racing from the run, skipped a beat as I realized what could have happened. Jamie's hand was still around my wrist, warm and steady. "Sorry for grabbing you like that," he said, his voice low and concerned. I saw the branch, and he didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The worry in his eyes said everything. I became acutely aware of how close we were standing, of the slight tremble in my legs that had nothing to do with exertion, of the way his thumb unconsciously moved in a small, comforting circle against my pulse point. "Thank you," I said softly, looking from the branch back to his face. I wasn't paying attention. Our eyes met, and time seemed to slow down. The early morning joggers, the distant sounds of the city waking up, the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, everything faded into the background. All I could focus on was Jamie's face, inches from mine, and the concern in his expression slowly transforming into something warmer, more intense. He released my wrist slowly, almost reluctantly, his fingers trailing lightly over my skin as he let go. The spot where he had touched me tingled, as if his fingerprints had left an invisible mark. We stood there for a moment, catching our breath, neither of us making a move to continue running. The interruption had broken the rhythm of our run, but created a different kind of tension, one charged with unspoken possibilities. "There's a bench just around the corner," Jamie suggested, gesturing further down the path. "Maybe we should take a break?" I nodded, suddenly grateful for the chance to sit and process what had just happened, both the near accident and the electric moment that followed. We walked side by side now, our earlier pace forgotten. I was acutely aware of the small distance between us, of how our hands occasionally brushed against each other as we navigated around the fallen branch. The bench was situated in a small clearing, offering a panoramic view of the river and the city skyline beyond. We sat down, leaving a respectful space between us, though I found myself wishing we were sitting closer. For a few minutes, we just sat in silence, watching the sunlight sparkle on the water's surface. It was Jamie who finally spoke, his voice thoughtful. You know, I've been running in this park for 2 years, but I've never actually stopped to enjoy this view. He turned to look at me, his expression open and genuine. Sometimes we get so caught up in the routine that we miss what's right in front of us. There was a deeper meaning to his words that wasn't lost on me. I wondered if he was talking about the view or something else entirely. I know what you mean, I replied, meeting his gaze. I've run this same route hundreds of times, but today feels different. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Maybe it's the company. The admission hung between us, an offering that could be accepted or politely ignored. Jamie's smile widened, reaching his eyes and creating small crinkles at the corners that I found unexpectedly charming. Definitely the company, he agreed, shifting slightly closer on the bench. I have to confess something. He looked slightly embarrassed now, running a hand through his curly hair. I've actually seen you running here before. Several times, actually. I've wanted to join you, but I wasn't sure if you preferred running alone. The revelation surprised me. The thought that he had noticed me, perhaps even looked for me, before today. Why today? I asked, genuinely curious about what had changed. Jamie looked down at his hands, then back at me. New Year's resolution, I guess. To take more chances. His honesty was disarming. Life's too short to wonder what if, right? I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. How many opportunities had I missed because I was too cautious, too comfortable in my routines? I'm glad you did, I told him, and I meant it. Usually I do prefer running alone, but this was nice. The words seemed inadequate to describe the connection I felt, but it was a start. Jamie smiled again, and I noticed a small dimple in his left cheek that hadn't been visible before. These little details about him were becoming precious discoveries, each one making me want to learn more. We talked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes or so. Jamie told me about his family. Parents still happily married after 30 years, a younger sister studying marine biology in Florida, a golden retriever named Max who lived with his parents because his apartment didn't allow pets. I shared stories about my own family, my mother's incredible cooking that I missed since moving to the city, my father's collection of vintage cameras that had inspired my interest in visual arts, my twin brother who lived on the opposite coast but called every Sunday without fail. The conversation flowed easily between serious topics and lighthearted ones. We discovered shared interests in photography, true crime podcasts, and Italian food. We debated the merits of different running shoes and laughed about our worst first date experiences. With each exchange, the initial attraction I had felt deepened into genuine interest and connection. I found myself cataloging his expressions, the way his hands moved when he talked about something he was passionate about, the slight tilt of his head when he was really listening to what I had to say. We should probably head back, Jamie said eventually, glancing at his watch. Some of us have clients waiting. He stood and offered his hand to help me up. I took it, noticing how perfectly our hands fit together. He held on a moment longer than necessary after I was standing, and I didn't pull away. Same time tomorrow, he asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice despite our obvious connection. Same time, I confirmed, already looking forward to it. We ran back together, at a more leisurely pace this time, still talking and laughing. When we reached the park entrance where our paths would diverge, there was an awkward moment of hesitation. How do you say goodbye to someone who was a stranger 2 hours ago, but now feels significantly more important? Jamie solved the dilemma by pulling out his phone. Can I get your number? Just in case I'm running late tomorrow or something. I gave it to him, and moments later my phone buzzed with a text. Great running with you today. Looking forward to tomorrow. Jamie. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about our encounter. Every detail played on repeat in my mind. The way he had appeared on the path beside me, our perfectly matched pace, the moment he grabbed my wrist to stop me from tripping, the conversation on the bench. It felt simultaneously like the most natural thing in the world and the most extraordinary. I wondered if he was thinking about me too, if he was also replaying our morning in his mind as he went about his day. The next morning, I woke up even earlier than usual, taking extra time with my appearance despite knowing that running would mess it up anyway. I arrived at our meeting spot 10 minutes early, both nervous and excited. What if yesterday was just a fluke? What if the connection I felt wasn't mutual? What if he didn't show up at all? But my worries evaporated when I saw him jogging toward me, right on time, with a smile that made my heart race before I'd taken a single step. "Good morning," he called as he approached. "Ready for round two?" There was an ease between us that belied our brief acquaintance. We fell into step together, picking up our conversation as if it had never paused. This time, we took a slightly different route, with Jamie showing me parts of the park I'd never explored despite my years of running there. We stopped at his favorite spot, a small, secluded clearing with wildflowers that caught the morning light in a way that made them look almost luminous. Days turned into weeks, and our morning runs became the highlight of my day. We developed a routine within our routine, meeting at the same spot, taking turns choosing the route, always ending with a few minutes on our bench to talk before heading to our respective jobs. Sometimes we ran in comfortable silence, enjoying the shared experience without the need for words. Other times, we talked continuously, eager to learn more about each other and share our thoughts on everything from politics to pizza toppings. The physical attraction between us grew alongside our emotional connection. There were lingering glances, casual touches that felt anything but casual, moments when our faces came close enough that I could feel his breath on my skin. But neither of us made a definitive move, as if we were both savoring the anticipation, the delicious tension that built with each morning we spent together. It was during our third week of running together that we encountered our first real obstacle. We were taking a new route through a less familiar part of the park when we passed a group of early morning boot campers. One of the men in the group called out to Jamie, and he waved back, his expression suddenly guarded. "Friend of yours?" I asked as we continued past. Jamie nodded, his usual openness replaced by something more reserved. "Former client," he explained tersely. "And we went on a few dates." I tried to keep my expression neutral despite the unexpected pang of jealousy I felt. "Didn't end well?" I ventured, sensing there was more to the story. Jamie was quiet for a moment, his pace slowing slightly. "He wasn't ready to be out," he finally said, glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "And I'm not interested in being someone's secret." The revelation hung between us, not just the information about his ex, but the confirmation of what I had suspected but we hadn't explicitly discussed. "That's understandable," I said carefully. "Everyone deserves to be with someone who's proud to be with them." Jamie studied my face, perhaps looking for signs of discomfort or judgment. Finding none, his shoulders relaxed slightly. "What about you?" he asked. "Any exes I should know about lurking in the park?" I laughed, grateful for the lightening of the mood. "Not in this park, thankfully. My last relationship ended about a year ago. He moved to Chicago for work, and neither of us wanted long distance." I hesitated, then added, "He was my first serious boyfriend after I came out in college." It was my turn to watch Jamie's reaction, to see if this explicit confirmation of what had been implied changed anything between us. His smile was warm and genuine. "His loss," he said simply. "Chicago's overrated anyway." The tension dissolved as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a deeper understanding. We had crossed an invisible threshold, moving from the careful dance of getting to know each other to a more honest exchange. The rest of our run that day felt different, more relaxed in some ways, more charged in others. The potential of what we could be to each other became more tangible, more real. The following week brought rain, a steady downpour that made our usual morning run impossible. I woke to a text from Jamie. "Unless you're part fish, running might be challenging today. Coffee instead." We met at a small cafe near the park entrance, both of us in regular clothes instead of running gear. It was strange to see Jamie in jeans and a button-down shirt, his curly hair tamed slightly with product. I wondered if he felt the same seeing me in my work clothes rather than running shorts and a t-shirt. "This feels like a date," Jamie commented as we settled into a corner table with our coffees. There was a question in his statement, an opening I could either take or deflect. I took a sip of my latte, considering my response. Would that be a bad thing? I finally asked, meeting his gaze over the rim of my cup. His smile was slow and deliberate, making my heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. "Not bad at all," he replied. "In fact, I've been trying to figure out how to ask you on a proper date for weeks." The admission made me laugh with relief. And here I thought I was being obvious with all my not-so-subtle flirting during our runs. Jamie reached across the table, his fingers brushing against mine. "Oh, you were obvious," he teased. "I just wanted to be sure." That rainy morning coffee was the first of many official dates. We discovered that our connection extended beyond our shared love of running. We had similar tastes in movies, complementary approaches to life's challenges, and the same dry sense of humor. The physical attraction that had simmered during our runs blazed into something more intense when we finally kissed goodbye after dinner at my favorite Italian restaurant. Standing under the awning as rain fell around us, Jamie's lips on mine felt like the most natural conclusion to the path we'd been running together all these weeks. Our relationship wasn't without its challenges. Jamie's busy schedule at the physical therapy clinic sometimes clashed with my deadlines for design projects. We had different approaches to conflict. I tended to process internally before discussing issues, while Jamie preferred to address problems immediately. And there was the matter of my brother's wedding across the country, where I would have to decide whether to introduce Jamie to my entire extended family after only a few months of dating. But through each challenge, we returned to what had brought us together in the first place. Those quiet morning runs where we had first found our rhythm together. No matter how busy or stressed we became, we protected that time, using it to reconnect, to communicate, to simply enjoy being in each other's presence. The park that had once been my solitary sanctuary became the foundation of our relationship, a place where we could always find our way back to what mattered. 6 months after Jamie joined my morning run and grabbed my wrist to stop me from tripping, we stood at the same spot on the trail, looking out at the river. The early morning light painted everything in soft gold, reminding me of that first day. "I have something to ask you," Jamie said, turning to face me. My heart quickened, not from exertion, but from anticipation. "Remember when I told you my New Year's resolution was to take more chances?" I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden lump in my throat. "Well, I'm taking another one," he continued, reaching for my hand. "Alex, will you move in with me? My lease is up next month, and I found a place closer to the park with enough room for both of us and all your plants." The question was so perfectly Jamie, practical and romantic at the same time, thoughtful of my needs and our shared love of these morning runs. My answer was immediate and certain. "Yes," I said, squeezing his hand. "Absolutely yes." His smile was radiant as he pulled me into his arms, lifting me slightly off the ground in his enthusiasm. As he set me down, he kept his arms around my waist, his forehead resting against mine. "I love you," he said softly, the words floating between us like a promise. "I love you too," I replied, the truth of it resonating through my entire being. We sealed the moment with a kiss, standing in the spot where our story had truly begun. Around us, the park was coming alive with the day's first visitors, joggers and dog walkers, bird watchers and commuters taking shortcuts. But in that moment, it felt like the world consisted only of us and the path we had chosen to run together. As we resumed our run, matching pace as we always did, I marveled at how a simple morning routine had led to this profound change in my life. How one person joining my run, matching my stride, and reaching out at just the right moment had altered my course so completely. The future stretched before us like an unexplored trail, full of possibilities and adventures we would navigate together, step by step, in perfect rhythm. Total _char_count, 18,875.